thank Nilay for a very nice talk. And we move on to the next talk by Vijay Balakrishna Shenoy.
Nilay, please unshare.
Yeah,
yes.
Please.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thanks.
Okay, so Vijay is going to tell about fractals from fields to paper and trees. Okay, so Vijay, please. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
I'll remind you after 5 minutes. Sorry,
yeah, you can hear me, right?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me. I'm actually a condensed matter person, and this is a completely new set of people to talk to. And it's been fantastic listening to all the talks. So thank you for that opportunity as well. So the work I'm going to talk about is done in collaboration with Roderick Mosner and a wonderful undergraduate student at IISc who has now moved to Caltech, and I've been generously supported by DST. Okay, so my talk has roughly 4 parts, if you like. The first part, I'll give you a big picture. This is to sort of, since I'm talking to a different community, I want to give you a big picture of what are the kind of contemporary problems in quantum condensed matter physics that people are thinking about and where fractons fit in that. And then I have 3 different stories to tell, and the talk will have a certain different flavor than the kinds of talks I've heard. I will not get into any sort of detail on anything. I'll just try to sort of lay out some general ideas of the field and sort of give you 3 examples of things that I have myself been involved in. Okay, so this is the sort of flavor of the talk. It's more of a catalog of results and not a detailed description of them or detailed discussion of them. So the first thing is, what are these fractons and where do they fit into the bigger picture? So to see this, I think I should move this somewhere else, maybe. Yeah, okay. To see where they fit into the bigger question, let's just see what is the big question in condensed matter. So you start with some UV scale, you define some set of degrees of freedom on that scale, probably which implements some symmetry or the other. And then you ask, you put some interactions between them. And the way we think about it in condensed matter is that there is a space of Hamiltonians that you have. And you sort of move in the space of Hamiltonians and you can ask what kind of different distinct phases you can get. And the influential idea in this field has been from Landau. And the main idea there is symmetry. And this had really influenced a lot of thinking in condensed matter physics until about 1980 or so, when the quantum Hall effect was discovered. And even then, you see much of what we learn in condensed matter physics was, at least starting with electrons, is summarized by these 4 states I've listed here. I won't go through them in detail. And the question then is, are these the only phases you can get by starting with electrons on some UV scale and they conspire to give you these phases, or are there other phases as well? So this is the question. So I pose the question, but you may wonder why one should bother about this, right? And I think I have a convincing answer to this. And the idea is that if you think about how humans evolved, you will see that every epoch of human evolution was actually controlled by a particular phase of electrons. So, the Stone Age was insulators, and then we found a gapless phase of metals, and then we learned how to make insulators into somewhat metallic. And now we are entering a new phase of, or new epoch, I hope, where we're going to use more exotic phases that are going to be what are called topological and entangled phases, and to produce even more fantastic things, and it could completely change the way we live, right? Okay, so this is the idea. This is what is the motivation for this. So let me just tell you what is the current status of what we understand on this. It's a very, very sketchy slide. I'll just show it anyway. So there are many more quantum phases, even starting with electrons, than what I showed you, the 5. This is really something that has been discovered in the last 15 years. And the recent realization is that, which was somewhat difficult for condensed matter people, is that 2 more concepts than what is more than what is just symmetry is necessary. One is entanglement, and this is and the other is topology. And this is difficult because these are not 4-letter words, and we are condensed matter people sort of take to 4-letter words more easily than bigger words. Okay. So what is this idea of entanglement? So entanglement has now taken the center stage for this, and everything is sort of thought as either short-range entangled phases or long-range entangled phases. And short-range entangled phases are those phases where entanglement is, there can be some interesting entanglement, but it is all short-range, so it has some nice area law, and that's all that is there to it. On the other hand, there are other phases which are what are called topologically ordered phases, and these are long-range entanglement. So the short-range entangled phases, you can also put some extra symmetries, and you must have heard of these things called topological insulators. They are actually short-range entangled. But for the purposes of my talk, I'm actually interested in these long-range entangled phases, and these are what are called topologically ordered. And I'm going to discuss a little bit about them and why they are of interest and so on. So instead of giving you some big formal definition of what a topologically ordered phase is, I'll just give you an example. So the simplest example of a topologically ordered phase is the ground state of the Z2 gauge theory on a square lattice. So what is the Z2 gauge theory on a square lattice? I have the square lattice I've shown here. These are the links of the square lattice, and at every link, I place a qubit or a spin half, a two-state system. And then there is the Pauli operators Z and X. And I have a magnetic field term, if you like. So this is, I go around the plaquette, and so it's all the Z's on the, yes, please.
I think the slide is frozen in the first one itself. I cannot see the next other slides.
Are the slides moving? Sorry?
Oh,
it's the slide of key questions, condensed matter physics key questions. That's what we can see.
Oh, okay.
Have you moved forward from it?
Yeah, yes, I have moved forward from it.
No, nothing's moved here. You might unshare and share again, perhaps.
Okay, sorry about this. Yeah, can you see this now?
Yes. Why bother?
Yeah.
Can you just try going forward and back once?
Yeah. How about now?
Yes, phases, current status.
Yeah. So this entanglement idea has been seen by everyone, right?
I'm seeing this slide for the first time.
Okay. So I'll just quickly go through this. So the idea is that, the main point, that is the main player here is entanglement. And so there are short range entangled phases and long range entangled phases. And, the so-called topological insulators, which are very popular these days, they fall in the category of short range entangled phases. And you have long range entangled phases, which are the topologically ordered phases. And they are actually useful for quantum computation as quantum memories. Okay, so this is what I'm showing you. I hope you can see that I'm showing you the toric code on the slide with the toric code here. Is that visible now?
Yeah, it is visible.
Yeah. So what is the toric code? It's just a version of Z2 gauge theory. So it's basically, I have a square lattice and I have spins sitting on the links of the square lattice. And there's a magnetic field term and something like an electric field term. Let's not get into the details. And the idea here is that the ground state of this is fourfold degenerate on a torus, right? And the degeneracy is not protected by any symmetry, or it is not coming from any symmetry. In fact, if I put the same kind of theory in a completely arbitrary random lattice like this, some Poissonian random lattice like this, you will see that it has exactly the fourfold degeneracy as you get from a square lattice. And so the idea is that this degeneracy is not protected by a symmetry, but comes from some kind of entanglement structure, some global Wilson lines of this theory. And the values of those Wilson lines fix, there are 4 distinct possibilities for those Wilson lines, and that's what actually gets you the degeneracy. And so the idea now is to use these degenerate states as your qubit, and that is then they are then protected from decoherence and so on, and this is how it can act as a quantum memory. But this is you'll realize that this is not such a good quantum memory if you are at finite temperatures, and the reason for that is the following. There are these excitations of this gauge theory, and those are the monopoles. You can actually change the plaquette value in each one of them, and thermally you can excite a pair of plaquettes. And once these plaquettes are excited, as I've shown here, these plaquettes can move freely around, by single spin flip operations, and they can be thermally flipped, and they can just move around, and they gain entropy, and then the topological order just breaks down. So this is the problem. So if you want to make the system robust, you have to make it large. And if you make it large, you lose out on entropy at finite temperatures, and the toric code is no longer a good quantum memory. So people have thought about trying to fix this problem in some way or the other. And one way people considered doing this was to go for some different types of qubit arrangements. And I'm going to introduce a model which turns out to have deep connection to fracton physics. And this model is called the X-cube model, and is sort of the poster child of fracton physics now. So what is this model? You take a cubic lattice in 3 dimensions. So I'm now in 3 spatial dimensions, and there is a cubic lattice. And the magnetic term now is somewhat different than what we had in the toric code. So what I have is, I take a cube, it has 12 spins that are on its links. And the magnetic term is like a volume term. It's a product of all these 12 spins. So that's what I've written as B cube here. And now there is something like a some charge operator here, and they're they're vectors. So I have this these 4 spins here. They take product, and it has a normal x direction. So it's called AX, and so on. And so this is also some kind of gates theory, but it has a very interesting property. The interesting property here is that the ground state of this has a sub-extensive ground state degeneracy. And so if I put this on a 3 torus with nx, ny, nz sides, the lengths of the sides, then you see that the ground state degeneracy is this massive number. Okay, and again, this is a very interesting degeneracy, in that this degeneracy also depends on what kind of lattice you have. In the sense that if it were not a cubic lattice, but some other lattice, then the degeneracy changes. It is still sub-extensive, but these factors will be different. And so people have now come up with notions of what is called as geometric order, or something called as foliated fracton order, and so on. There's one more point I wanted to just briefly mention here, because it will become useful for me later. And that is that you will see that these theories have certain dual descriptions, and dual description will be some kind of Ising models. And those Ising models will have subsystem symmetries. What do we mean by that? You could actually flip a subsystem of spins, not the full, or not local, but a subsystem like a plane of spins or something, and the theory will be invariant to that. Okay. So you may ask, what has this to do with fractons? So what you will find is the excitations of this. So for example, is I can go to a cube and try to change its the value of b there. I could make b equals -1. And what you will see is that you cannot move these things by single spin flips. So let me just quickly demonstrate that for you. So you can see that this is the standard the toric code that I showed you. So I go to the and you see I can move these plaquettes by single spin flips, right? Very easily I can do that. But if I come here and I flip one of these spins, you see I create these 4 B, the 4 cubes which have negative B. So I try to move this by flipping a single spin. And now you see that I cannot be in the same energy manifold, because I've created 2 extra cubes. And this means that I cannot move a single cube without creating other excitations, or in other words, a single cube is immobile. Interestingly, a dipole of these can be moved, as you can see, right? So a dipole of these can be moved. So single charges cannot be moved, but dipoles can be moved. And this means that the charges of this theory have fractional mobility, and this is why people call them fractals. Okay, so there's a whole set of things that have gone on in this field for the last 3, 4, 5 years, maybe 5 years, and you can look at some of these review articles for inspiration, or if you like, if you want to explore further. So what I'm going to try and tell you is how to construct some phenomenological theories that can have fracton-like excitations. Okay, so this is what I'll do first, and maybe since I'm kind of running short of time, I'll run through this fairly fast. And let me just give you an idea. The big picture is the following: that what we want to do is we want to write some kind of Gates theory, and the Gates theory has higher rank tensors as electric and magnetic fields. So this is the crudest idea here. So imagine that I had a Gates theory where the electric field tensor was a second rank symmetric tensor, and I impose a Gauss law which says that 2 divergences of this on these 2 indices is the charge. I just say this. And now you will find that I have a conserved charge and a conserved dipole moment. So what does this mean? So if the dipole moment is conserved, I have an isolated charge, I cannot move that charge because motion of the charge will violate the conservation of dipole moment. Which means if I conserve the dipole moment, I will make the charge a fracton, which means the charge cannot move. Okay. And this is the idea. And so the charge current itself will be the divergence of some kind of dipole current and leading to a continuity equation, which is of this form I'm showing here. So you can actually make this formal by writing a gauge theory and so on. So I will actually show a more general version of this in a minute. And this theory will have a gapless photon. And so we can ask a more general question. Can we have a theory where I have order n fractons? And what do I mean by order n fractons? I have fractons whose 2 to n multiples cannot move. And not only they are point objects, they can be extended objects. And they can be in arbitrary dimension. And so this is something we worked out a couple of years back. And the mathematical structure that we need for this, at least one possible way of doing this, is you need to have certain kind of tensors. So there are symmetric tensors, anti-symmetric tensors. You can have derivations. You can have these exterior derivatives. You can have divergences. This is just notation. And so the main mathematical structure we need here is something called as Kn tensors. So what are Kn tensors? They are symmetric tensors of anti-symmetric forms. Or symmetric tensors of K forms, right? So that's what I've written here in some symbolic way. And these are the objects that will enter the theory as gauge fields and so on. And I have used some notation here to derive, to describe what kind of mathematical operations we can do on them. But the big picture is the following. Our scalar potential of the Maxwell theory will become a k-1 n tensor, and the vector potential will become a kn tensor, and the charges will have the same kind of structure. So this is the charge and this is the current, and you can define electric fields which are of this kind. I've just written this down in this way, and you have magnetic fields written in this way. And in this way of doing things, the electric field will be a kn tensor and the magnetic field will be a k+1 n tensor. You can write a Lagrangian density in this fashion, and you can define a gauge transformation. And the invariance of the Lagrangian to this gauge transformation will force a continuity equation of this kind, which will give us that the theory has fractonic excitations up to order n. That means the 2 to the n multiples of this cannot move freely. And they are also k-1 dimensional extended charges. So there is a more general version of this. I'm not showing any details of this. You can actually have photons which disperse here as q to the n. You can construct theories with different kind of photon dispersions. Omega goes as q to the z, where z can be anything from 1 to the n. You can look at our paper for the details here. And just to make a comment to connect with the community that I'm talking to, if you look at this 2-1 z is equal to 1 theory, this is the non-fractonic theory of line charges, which is this Karl-Brunman theory. And also there is a more generalized version of K1 theory, which is the theory of extended objects, the Maxwell theory of extended objects. So this is a bit formal, and you can ask whether these things have anything to do with the reality. And the answer is yes. And the idea is that this 1-2 z is equal to 1 theory can be shown to be actually dual to an elastic solid in 2 dimensions. And what are the charges of this theory? The charges of this theory are disclinations of the elastic solid, and the dipoles of this theory are the bound states of, or the dipoles of disclinations are dislocations of the theory. And so this picture is now, it allows us to revisit some of the ideas that of the crystal elasticity and so on that we have looked at in 2 dimensions, and the Kosterlitz-Thouless transition in 2 dimensions. Okay. So in the remainder of the time, I don't know how much I will be able to do because I think I'm kind of running short of time. So I'll just show you something very interesting. And so the idea is I'll show you that fractons are much closer to us than we think. And if you just look at the sheet of paper that I'm holding, you can see fractons in there. I'll show you. So I'll ask you to indulge me in finding a piece of paper close to you and just ask yourself, if I draw an arbitrary line on this piece of paper, and ask yourself, can you fold this paper smoothly along this line? And the answer is no, because if you try to draw an arbitrary curve on this and try to fold the paper along that, you will see that it will produce other small micro folds and so on. On the other hand, if you try to fold the paper along a straight line, it folds very nicely, right? And so on. So bottom line of this is that the fact that the paper can be folded only along a straight line is actually related to fractonic physics. And I'll just show you that in the next few minutes. Okay, so let me start by discussing some things here. So if I want to discuss the elasticity of a three-dimensional solid, like solids in our world, then you have a displacement field, a strain tensor, and elasticity tensor, and these solids have elastic waves, phonons, if you like, which disperse as linearly with momentum, right? Okay, so if you have the fortitude to read Landau-Lifshitz all the way to the end, volume 7, I believe, a theory of elasticity, then you will see that there is a theory that you can write down, which is a somewhat somewhat effective theory. When the system is thin meaning that two of its dimensions are much bigger than the other dimension, like a piece of paper that I'm holding. Okay, and this is called the theory of plates. And the main point here is that if I know the displacement of the plate vertical to its midplane, then I know everything about this. Okay, and I won't get into the details. I'll just show you what the Lagrangian is. The Lagrangian has a kinematic parameter that enters it, which is the curvature, two derivatives of this displacement. And you can write the potential energy corresponding to that. And then there's the kinetic energy of the motion of the plate perpendicular to the plate. So that is the kinematic piece. Okay, the kinetic energy, I mean. So this is the Lagrangian, and you will see that this theory has waves which disperse as k square, not k. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce defects in this theory. So what are the kind of defects I can introduce? So I can have, W is my displacement field. So it has to have something to do with some badness of W. So one thing I can do is I can have what is called as a tear defect. So W becomes double valued. So as I'm showing you here. Or you can have, because, it's the curvature, second derivative of W that enters the Lagrangian. You can have slope discontinuities of W, as I have shown here. So it's called a fold defect. And so what we can do is we can write down what are the fold defects and the so-called the tear defect and the fold defect. And the most important thing you should note here is that the fold defect is characterized by a vector quantity. And what is this vector quantity? It is the vector quantity is the jump in the slope as you traverse, as is the holonomy of the derivative, right? So it's a jump in the slope. And now what I can do is I can construct a theory in which this W field has both the smooth elastic displacements as well as the defect displacement. So this is my theory of defected plates. Okay, so this field W has now both the smooth and the defects. Okay, so I've introduced the theory of plates, and I'm going to keep this aside for a minute. And I'm going to discuss a different kind of gauge theory, which has been studied recently quite a bit. And this gauge theory is a gauge theory with vector charges. So what is this gauge theory? So I have a scalar potential, which is a vector. It's kind of a strange thing to say, but okay. So that is the vector. And my vector potential is a second rank symmetric tensor. Okay, so this is A alpha beta. And how do I define my electric and magnetic fields? So this electric field is defined in this fashion. It's like a strain corresponding to this, symmetric part of the gradient corresponding to this phi alpha. And then there's the usual time derivative with respect to A. And then there is a number, which is the magnetic field, which is, two derivatives of two curls of this symmetric tensor. And this is my Lagrangian density written in the fairly usual way. And I can now see what kind of gauge transformation leaves this invariant. And the gauge transformation that leaves this invariant is this particular expressions that I have written. Okay, so what will gauge invariance buy me? It will tell me that there is a continuity equation of this kind. That is, the rate of change of this vector charge density is the divergence of a second rank symmetric current, which certainly means that the total vector charge is conserved. And in addition, you can show that there is something called a moment of a charge that gets conserved. And that's what I've written down here. So what does that mean? That means if I have an isolated charge Q alpha, then that isolated charge can move only along its direction. That means that in the plane, if its vector charge is Q alpha, it can only move along Q alpha. It cannot move in any other direction, because if it moves along any other direction, it will violate this moment conservation condition. And this theory has a set of photons which disperses as k square. Okay, so what I'm going to show you now is the main result. So one can show that the defected plate theory is actually dual to this vector charge gauge theory, right? And the duality will show you, this is the duality table, if you like. So the bending moment will get mapped to the electric field and various other things. So in particular, the vector charges actually get mapped to the tear defects. So this is the main point here. The vector charges are related to the tear defects or the defects which have the jump in the slope. So how do we understand folding now? So if I now take this, the blue line, the blue data shown here corresponds to the plate version of this picture. So you see that here I have a vector charge, I have a jump in slope where the slope along the E2 direction is, is changing. So the duality dictionary will tell me that this corresponds to a vector charge whose vector is along the one direction. So now from the gauge theory side, this Q alpha, this charge can move only along the one direction. And that is exactly what happens when I have a piece of paper and I have a straight fold here, and I can just move this, move this charge along this fold. So this point is a fracton actually, right? And you can move it along that. And that's because, the gauge theory allows only for motion of the charge along that direction. So folding can be understood as motion of a charge along its direction. So now you see, you can get more out of this. So you can ask what happens when I tear paper. So you see, if I take this configuration of the plate, so it has now a tear. And if you compute what is the charge associated with this kind of a defect, you will see that that is exactly same as the charge, what I showed in the previous slide, that the charge along the x1 direction. But now what is happening is I'm trying to move the charge perpendicular to the x1 direction along the x2 direction, and that's what I'm doing by tearing. And when I do that by tearing, I shed these, I shed a dipole of these vector charges, and the dipole of the vector charges you can show is actually a tear defect. So what happens is leaves behind a trail of tear defects, and that is what is the torn piece of paper, which, as you can see, is okay. I've kind of run out of time, so this is the picture. So I just wanted to show you something very exciting that we have been trying, and maybe take your suggestions on how to proceed, and maybe some connections to other things. And so the main point here is the following. I'm going back to the quantum problems, and I'm again coming to this again from the idea of quantum memories and so on, of how to how to use ideas from fractons, etc., to try and get better quantum memories, etc. So this is what one is motivated by. And so the idea is that all the lattice models, etc., that I showed you, they have a continuum limit as a field theory defined on a manifold. For example, the Chern-Simons theory, for example, the toric code that I showed you, you can show has a continuum limit, which is like Chern-Simons theory with some matrix level. It has multiple gauge fields and so on. So I won't get into the details of that, right? And you can then use topological quantum field theories to try and actually classify them. And there's a lot of work on this already. You can look at this beautiful paper here by Zhougang Wen. The question we are asking is, why should we stick to manifolds? Can we go beyond manifolds, right? So can we go on discrete systems which are not, which don't have this long wavelength descriptions as quantum fields defined on a manifold, right? And so if you ask this question very broadly, then of course there are infinite, there are many different ways you can make things non-manifold. So what we want to hold on to is, we want to hold on to some notion of translational symmetry. And this naturally leads to the notion of tree graphs. And this is what I call as arboreal arenas, right? Arenas where you define some qubits, where you place qubits, and which have some notion of translation symmetry. So let me show you what those arboreal arenas are. So you can start with this thing called the Bethe lattice, which is that, I have some graph and it's connected like this, as I've shown. It's a tree, so there are no closed loops in this. So there are notions. So if it is k coordinated, so for example, if I have a site and if there are k links coming to it, then we call it Bethe k. And there is a notion in graph theory also called as hypergraphs. And what is a hypergraph? The link here not only connect to one point or 2 points as shown here, it can connect to multiple number of points. And each site can actually have any number of links connected to them. So for example, Kn means each site has k links coming to it, and the each link has n sides attached to it. So this is, for example, beta 2,3, and this is hyper beta 2,3, and this is hyper beta 3,3. And now there is also a notion of a graph Cartesian product. So you can actually define higher dimensional versions of this. Of course, that's a very vague thing to say here. What you mean by this is that if you think of this as one dimensional in some sense, then you can define higher dimensional objects by some notion of something called as Cartesian product. So you can actually create higher dimensional arboreal arenas out of this. And the beautiful thing about this kind of construction is that the notion of what is a plaquette, what is a cube, etc., naturally generalized to arboreal arenas. Okay, so what is the new physics you get out of this? So this is the sort of portfolio of the results that you get here.
Vijay, sorry to
yes, yeah, I'll just finish.
To interrupt you. You have just 2 minutes.
Yeah, I'll just finish in 2 minutes. Yeah. So what happens here is that you can define gauge theories on such things. And what I want to show you is the most exciting thing is that even the simplest Z2 gauge theory on an arboreal arena is fractonic. So their excitations cannot move. Okay, so this is a very interesting result. And this could possibly have applications for quantum memories and so on. I won't get into the details of that. And these are very large degeneracies corresponding to many global Wilson lines. There is a new class of dualities. So for example, the Ising model on a Kn hypertree is dual to the Ising model on the Nk hypertree. And there is also a beautiful classification of topological orders. Okay, so this is the sort of main summary of results. So I'll just quickly show you some of the main results here. So you can define what are called these generalized quantum Ising models and generalized gauge theories. So they have confined phases and deconfined phases. We can map them out. You can also do this for X-cube model. X-cube model, all its excitations are completely frozen. They cannot move at all. There is a big ground state degeneracy. And you have these fantastic set of dualities. These are, all known dualities of discrete systems. They are special cases of the dualities that we have, like Kramers-Bonnier on various lattices, etc. They are all special cases of the duality we are showing here. And so this is the duality table. So we have a complete set of dualities that we have worked out, and this is the table of that. And here's a very, very beautiful result we are very excited about. So you see, I asked the question, what are the different kinds of topological orders you can have? So let's say that there are different distinct kind of topological orders. They're actually classified by some kind of patterns of entanglement. Let's say whatever they are, and there is some way to classify them. But we do not know how to apply that directly to these arboreal lattices. So how do we do this? So we use the notion of something called as entanglement renormalization. So the idea is that if I can find a quantum circuit which connects one to the other, then I say they're equivalent. And now comes a very beautiful result. You will see that if I take two-dimensional arboreal arenas and define the Z2 gauge theory on them and work in the deconfined side of it, then there are only 3 distinct kind of topological orders, right? Toric code orders. So there is one toric code order on the square lattice kind of stuff, which is what I discussed in the beginning of my talk. Then there is an arboreal arena where one dimension, which is, this is B2. B2 is like a line. So along one direction, it's manifold-like. In the other direction, it's tree-like. There is a toric code order on that. And remember, that's independent of K. So as long as K is greater than 2, that the toric code order on K equal to 3 and K equal to 4 is same. And similarly, there is a distinct toric code order on when K1 and K2 are greater than 2. And similar things go for fracton orders, but now there are 4 distinct types of them. So we have now gotten some handle on how to start thinking about classifying quantum orders on this kind of tree-like structures. Okay, so I've run out of my time. So let me just summarize. I hope I gave you a brief view of what is this fracton world, what is going on here. At least what we are doing here, at least. I told you about 3 things. I told you about some generalized gauge theories. I told you about, I gave you an example of fractons in real life. And I told you our attempts to try and go back to the quantum problem and try to use some of these fracton ideas to look at models which don't have a manifold description at long wavelengths. And we believe that that is quite promising, and it can lead to some interesting possible applications as quantum memories and so on. This is something that we are working on, and I've also put in, I've also listed some directions to go forward. Okay, so let me thank you, and thank you very much for the opportunity to talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Vijay, for a very interesting talk. So I see questions. One from Madhavahal. Please go ahead with your question. No? And there is a question from Somdatta. So if he is available, please ask your question.
Yeah, so the question is, as far as I understood, the fractons are such that the single charges cannot separate from the initial configuration, but dipoles can separate, right?
The version that I showed you, that is the case. Yes.
Yeah. So doesn't this look suspiciously similar to what happens for quarks? Because quarks can't separate, but
No.
mesons can.
Yeah. But you see, the quarks are in a confined phase. So you can show that this theory is actually deconfined. So it's in the electrical sector, they're deconfined.
No, what I'm saying is, can't this fracton model be modeled in terms of, I mean, can't quark confinement be modeled in terms of some sort of fracton physics?
No, see, the fractonic gauge theory has a confined phase and a deconfined phase. So if you go to the deconfined phase, everything will have, there'll be string, if you go to the confined phase, all charges, everything will have string tension, right? You can't separate any of them, right?
Yeah, that's what happens for quarks, right?
Yeah. But so it's completely confined. But here, if I look at, I showed you the magnetic sector, but if I look at the electrical sector, it is completely deconfined. Hello.
Okay, so I think there is no more questions. So let's thank Vijay again for a very beautiful talk.
Okay, thanks so much. Yeah.